This week we get medieval for pay in Wartales. Rockstar is going to take a page out of its own handbook and rob you, at least for $100. And the Switch 2 was announced, and it looks like it might actually get some AAA attention.
Hi, I'm Nick, and if Josh forgets his thing again, I'm gonna poop.
Hi, I'm Josh, and thank God TikTok's back, because learning Mandarin is hard.
And I'm Andin.
Welcome
I guess
to
I speak
Video
Mandarin.
Game Tango.
Hey.
Hey.
We're back in your earballs and
By
sometimes eyeballs.
Popular demand.
I know it's coming every week, yet you still startle me.
Well, I don't know if it's by popular demand, but it's by some demand. It's by the demand of a few, at least.
Well, I mean, they paid enough of a ransom to get Nick out of the box, so...
It's true.
Yeah, for sure.
We were voted most likely to be a podcast.
I wish that were true. Just so we're voted for
It's a
something.
really safe vote.
I forgot to do something that we always do pre-podcast is talk about in what order we would like to talk about our topics.
Oh, yeah.
I think probably start round robin with you, Nick.
With me.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about a good game.
Good game, yeah. So I found a really nice middle-aged male comfort game called Wartales. It's been out for a while now, but as of recently, I think they're up to 4 DLCs, plenty of updates. They just had a big update. Finally bit the bullet, tried it out, and I was pleasantly surprised. Overall, I'd give this game probably a B+, edging on an A-, but it scratches an itch that I've had for a while, which is a game that I can fall back to, kind of half turn my brain off, and feel like I've got a lot of room ahead of me just to explore the game. So what is Wartales? Wartales is a little bit of D&D, a little XCOM, but with the guise and vibe of something like Mountain Blade or Battle Brothers. You run a mercenary company in a series of kingdoms all interconnected, full of strife by war or plague or disease. It is a fantasy light setting. So while the majority of it is vaguely early medieval coded, there are some fantasy elements. I think some like the plagued characters can come back as zombies, stuff like that. But you're not going to find any wizards here slinging fireballs or anything like that. No, just a rough and tumble band of people out trying to make a living however they can. The vibe is, like I said, very kind of low fantasy, low power, a little grimdark, and you have a lot of options going ahead when you start. So by base, the classes define what weapons a person can use. So when you hire someone new at a tavern, they might have access to swords and shields or bows or two-handed hammers. And each of those classes has their own skill tree that you can further refine into a character that generates a lot of resources through defending or attacking or flanking, things like that. And the combat is very much kind of like XCOM. There's one main meta resource, Valor, which is restored during a rest, which I'll get to in a minute, or by doing certain things in combat, like a tank character engaging in combat or a rogue flanking an enemy, which makes for a really fun kind of crunchy little, okay, do I try to be 100% effective or do I kind of build up Valor and then blow it all in like one turn, right? What separates this game from other games of that nature, it has a lot of non-combat gameplay. Back to rests. Your characters can only travel so far in the overworld before they need to rest, and your camp is a physical kind of grid location. You set out your campfire and your cauldron and your tent and your stretchers and any other profession-related equipment, blacksmithing tools, tinkering table, scholar table. And there's a little bit of synergy bonuses depending on how you place your equipment. Characters that spend more time next to one another develop relationships. If, for example, your archer accidentally hits one of your allies, their relationship can drop and they can start to hate each other, which is fun. But the professions develop pretty quickly in the game as you discover, like you go to your tavern and you order a beer, you learn how to have like the brewer profession, right? And some of them have little mini games. They get annoying. Fishing and mining is a little quick time event, and you will be doing it dozens, if not hundreds of times if you play the game for any length of time. But they do level up and they get more abilities. You can also capture people, knock them out, either anyone, really. You can capture refugees, other mercenaries, pretty much anybody but law enforcement, and sell them to a jail for money, sell them to bandits as slave labor for other resources, or you can recruit them. You can also do the same with wolves and bears, and I believe really any creature you can run into in combat. I did see somebody post a meme where they had captured a zombie and made it their scholar, and it sat at a lectern in their base just learning things, which was kind of funny. But with the DLCs, there's a whole kind of pirate archipelago. There are fighting pits, there are coliseums. And one thing I kind of enjoyed, you get to build your own tavern. So tavern simulators have kind of blown up this last year.
Oh, yeah.
And having that baked into a game is like a side thing, kind of like a card game for Final Fantasy. Then not only can your mercenaries, if you need to, go work at to take a break, it also generates money, which you can use as your mercs, as you do money. There is a couple different kind of meta role-playing skill trees for your company as a whole. Like the more combat stuff you do, you unlock new combat perks or trade in merchant stuff or illegal stuff. Like the more you pick locks or thieve from stores, you get stuff that helps or improves that kind of stuff. Plenty of little quests. Each little area has its own storyline, and depending on which major quest, which way you go with it, you eventually finish the storyline, and it kind of affects the area. Overall, I've really enjoyed it. I'm probably 50 hours into this save. My characters are about level 6. The cap is 13. And I've mostly explored 3 of the 6 areas. So I'm about halfway through the game. I was telling Andy earlier that the game really does feel good. It's solid. It's fun. I always feel like I can hop in. Okay, what quest can I do? What missions can I take? But unfortunately, all those individual little systems I mentioned, they feel like they're about 80% of the way done. I think it was one of the companies had their first major game or one of their first major game. They have another one cooking right now. But it really felt like a solid proof of concept. That would probably be the worst way to describe it. It does a little injustice, but I could really see a lot of these mechanics being used better, having a little more synergy, a little less busy work, less wasting of my time as a player.
Sure. There's
a lot of you cook 3 different meals and you combine them to a feast to get a bigger benefit for your troop when they rest. But I mean, you have to make that meal every time you camp, right? And then you're, having to make sure you have all the different types of foods available to cook your stuff. So, you're doing a little busy work in town, making sure you have 10 of this fish and 10 of that sausage. And it's fine. Like each individual task isn't really that onerous, but they do add up. And it does mean a lot of that gameplay is busy work. But it's not the end of the world. And like I said, I'm only about halfway through the game. I do enjoy it. The only other thing I'd mention is pacing. As I mentioned, 40 hours in, I'm only halfway through. I've only explored 3 areas. That means I've done a lot of side quests and repeatable quests to gear myself up because the pacing of the game is very strange. I wasn't entirely sure which one to pick, but when you start a new game, you have the options between region locked and adaptive mode. So region locked seemed like the main thing. You start in the same central area of Tiltron. The enemies are in a level range per kingdom. So, you finish Tiltron, then you go to the next one that's the next highest level bracket. And as far as I understand it, the amount of enemies and their equipment and whatnot is kind of set per region. So if you want, something I didn't mention, you can have as many mercenaries as you want. I'm rolling with 12. I've seen some people on the subreddit who have 70, right? Doesn't mean your combats are going to take 3 hours. But that's only if you play adaptive mode, which apparently means you can start anywhere, but the difficulty of the game scales with your characters. So if you have 70 mercenaries, you're fighting between 60 and 80 enemies every battle, which gets really annoying when you keep running into wolves and bears and refugees in the woods who are just hungry. And now you have to fight a small army of peasants just to keep going down the road, right? So I do enjoy the region locked. It's more traditional. But yeah, it's just a little slow, which kind of, like I said, works in the favor that this is a game I can just go to and turn on when I don't need to think really hard or I don't want to play something competitive like Rivals.
Totally.
And yeah, I enjoy it. It's good.
Excellent.
I would recommend it.
No, and I mean, as long as you're enjoying yourself, it sounds like you may get like up to 80, maybe more hours in the game. So
yeah, I'm trying not to treat it as a game I need to finish. I'm not sitting down to play it to make progress. So I will probably likely eventually finish it. The difficulty spikes between regions is massive, which is a lot of the reason for my grindiness. There's a huge jump between like 30 and 60% health and damage that enemies do between regions. So you really feel like you got to like top off your potential by the end of a region before you go to the next one.
Sure.
And again, it's funny to me about like kind of mildly underbaked. It didn't need to be that drastic of a change between regions, But yeah, it's still solid. I would recommend it. I'm not sure how much. It's probably $30 or so. I can look it up real quick. But yeah, it's available on Steam. And like I said, it had apparently really good early access back in its day. It came out April 2023. It's currently only $17.50. So yeah.
So half of what you expected.
Half of what I expected.
Yeah. So I mean, would you say the game is easily worth $30? Seeing as that was
if you like Mountain Blade or Battle Brothers or XCOM or even D&D, this really almost with all the non-combat stuff feels like a kind of D&D light simulator. A good amount of choices in storylines depending on who you want to help. There's not much of a plot, but there are narratives in each region. Yeah, it's definitely worth $18. I mean, like I said, I've already gotten 40 hours out of it, and that's after spending about 10 hours in my first save before I kind of knew what I was doing and I restarted. You do have the option of respecing your characters, and that can be a sticking point. It does cost money. Like you have to go to the Brotherhood training grounds. It's not cheap. So it's also kind of hard to make a bad character. But it's not easy to make a really good character until you know the mechanic. Like you'll play for 20 hours and think you guys are good, and then you realize 30, 40 hours in, you're like, I should have taken that ability, but I wouldn't have known at the time, that I would have found like this armor that has this ability that synergizes with it. So it does have the ability to respec, and yeah, it's good.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, love hearing about new games. I don't know if it's necessarily it looks a bit XCOM-y to me. Is like,
yeah, the combat is turn-based, grid-based. There are no percentage chance to hit except for ranged attacks.
Okay.
The more one of your allies or an enemy is in line of the shot, the lower the percentage. I mean, usually it only goes down to about like 30% chance to hit another character and 70% chance to hit the main one. And there's ways of getting around that, but yeah, it's the combat's nothing to write home about. We've seen it before, but it is nice, like deciding, okay, am I going to use these valor points here or there? And quickly, once you know what you're doing, like I can usually, in a combat of my difficulty level, manage to almost kill the enemy before they get to act. Because how the initiative works is it tries to intersperse every enemy character with yours. So if you're using your slots, because your characters don't have their own initiative, you just have player slot, and then you choose which of your characters you want to use. Okay. You try to kill or lock down every enemy right before they go.
Right.
Which works great if there's less enemies than allies.
Sure.
But if you're going to go to a bubonic rat nest where you have to kill the rat mother and hope you have cures for the plague in your inventory, you will get overwhelmed if you don't know what you're doing. Little stuff like that, yeah.
So there's also like a variety of enemies that you've...
like I said, there's light fantasy elements.
Yeah.
Bears, wolves, boars. My bard wanted to learn a song, and it required me to capture and train a boar, name it Hammy, and have it kill 5 enemies in battle. So I'm currently doing that so that I can teach my bard that, so I can play what amounts to Guitar Hero in the tavern. So you have a little Guitar Hero mini game. And depending on how well you do, you get, the people like it and whatnot.
So you have mini games inside the mini games. That's fun. I do like that. That's pretty dope.
Yeah.
Well, excellent. Well, hey, Josh, speaking about Grand Theft Auto.
Games within games.
Grand Theft Wagon.
As Grand Theft Auto nears ever closer. I know we're, baby steps into 2025, but already people are clamoring for another trailer, and rumor has it January 30th, we might get one. So, I mean, again, unsubstantiated, but it would be fun to see. Now, we've talked about it before, and it's much like GTA 6 is coming back around that price point. Now, we heard from the CEO of Take-Two that he wanted to charge minimum $100 worth of $100 for GTA 6, and honestly, maybe that wasn't even enough, and that you should have to pay to continue to play it. All kinds of crazy ideas that nobody liked. I mean, there's a few people that liked it, but we didn't. So the idea of pricing has come back around, and once again, that $100 mark seems to be settling. Now, this comes from entertainment industry analyst Matthew Ball. Now, Ball says some game makers are hoping GTA 6 will be priced at the $80 to $100 mark, breaking the current $70 mark for standard AAA games. And that, of course, if that's the new standard mark, right, $80 to $100, well, that drives up lower price games, because there's games that come out that are $50. There's games that come out that are $60. Those are going to be bumped up in that same price range. So suddenly, what was going to be a $50 AA title is now going to be a $70 AA title.
He's trying not to break. He's very angry.
Yeah.
So I don't like the idea of a price, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So video games have been admittedly fairly inflation proof. We've only seen a couple of price increases in the last 20 to 30 years, from 50 to 60, and then mostly in the pandemic era from 60 to 70. But I feel like $100, even for something, yes, does GTA deserve $100? Would it be deserving of the $100 price mark? Yes. And
at least versus the average price of the game.
At least versus the average price of the game. And by inflation standards, if this came out at $70, it would be the cheapest GTA title, accounting for inflation. But there's a flip side to this. There is already frequently $100 games. Now, they come with something like extra stuffs, or it's a special edition, or you get to play 3 or 4 days early, right? So there's a couple of give me's in it, but there's already $100 games. So just make a special edition and charge $100 for your special edition GTA and let people play it a few days early. There's also, when people say, well, inflation and games need to, keep up. What about microtransactions and game passes and?
I mean, we had the shark card system in GTA 5. They already had.
They made $9 billion in revenue over that. So it's not like they're hurting for profits. And all games, it's the microtransactions aren't included in the price, and a lot of full price games have microtransactions. It's not just your free to play shooters. So honestly, the video game industry, which grows by billions of dollars every year, isn't hurting for revenue. Stop charging more. Now, like I said, GTA 6 would be worth $100, but it's not going to stop at GTA 6 because it never does. Nothing ever fucking stops where it should here. Yeah. I don't know. It just gets my blood up.
No, yeah, it's frustrating, and it sucks that this has become like a blood-sucking, thirsty industry, right? At least at the top level, the AAA at the very least. But to play devil's advocate, because again, I don't like it. You talked about video games being relatively recession-proof, and we had this conversation a little bit earlier, and that like it was, $50 was pretty typical price of a game until the early 2000s. It wasn't until way later, 2012, where they started becoming $60, right? And then that felt pretty bad, but we adjusted to it really quickly. Now a $60 game would be nice because they've all moved on to 70 in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So while it stayed relatively stable for a long time. We did used to have really expensive games before it kind of became standardized price wise in like the $50 mark toward the early 2000s. So to have kind of a one-off title that's going to be more expensive, with no additional content, because I'm not talking about a game that comes with some kind of special control or something that comes with anything extra. It's a disc in a case, or in the case of most people, it's just going to be an online purchase, right? To get nothing.
You aren't actually even owning it.
Right,
which
right.
is it
You're
means
renting
you don't even
it for $100.
You are 100%. That is kind of the way of games at the moment.
Chat brought that up. It's a good point.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't mind the occasional expensive game. I think Rockstar, if you're going to pay more for a game, I think Grand Theft Auto makes sense. The scale of these games are huge.
Sure,
like they often tout the largest map ever made.
I get it. You can argue that it's a boutique game, right? Yeah. Like it's a specialty game. One comes out every fucking 12 years.
Their own engine.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. You could argue that. And maybe Grand Theft Auto, I get it. Maybe it should be more, but the thing is it's not. I feel like it's going to be precedent setting, and because it always is. It's never like, oh well, this is a boutique experience. It's like, well, they charged $100, so if you want to play the new Modern Warfare, the same game that we release every fucking year, sometimes twice a year, well, you're going to pay $100.
Or you tout the latest quadruple A game like Skull and Bones.
Yeah.
Right.
We're going to pay $100
Yeah.
plus a subscription fee, plus skin fees, plus whatever fees. And you're going to pay those. And it just where does it stop?
Yeah.
Where
I think my point is here that yes, I am worried there will be consequence to a $100 Grand Theft Auto game. I personally don't think it's that bad to have to pay $100 for such a enormous game, right? I don't want to. It's more money that I have to spend. However, I am worried about the consequences of it. Practically going forward, it would be a lot easier for other studios to justify charging $100 for their games. It could very quickly become the norm that we see another price increase across the board amongst all AAA studios. That would be my worry.
Well, there are, of course, developers outside of this curve. The number one that comes to mind is Larian, of course.
Yeah.
And they released their badass bitchin' game that I've put hundreds of hours in for $60. Did Baldur's Gate 3 take longer than GTA 6 to make? Come on. And they did just fine on sales. They did just fine on money. No one in the fucking C-suite at Larian is having an empty pocketbook today.
Yeah.
So it can be done. They proved it.
I mean, yeah.
It can be done.
But they could make more money.
They are drastically two different scales, right?
I know it's kind of like...
And Grand Theft Auto 6 has taken more time. In fact, one of the funny things is while I brought up this trailer for GTA 6, the top comment, if I go back to it, is actually from the Slow-Mo guys, so that's Gavin Free. He says, at this rate, I've got about 3 GTAs left in my lifetime. So they are taking that long to create. Yeah. Like Grand Theft Auto 5 came out in 2013, September 17, 2013.
So that's kind of the argument. It's kind of like the hard point in this argument here is that if any game deserves to be $100, it is probably GTA 6.
Yes.
However, it's not going to be just GTA 6. It's going to be every fucking game. So
we can hope not. We can hope that
we
this
can
doesn't
hope
start a
not.
precedence, but like, we are being a little bit doomery about it. But
I am being a little bit doomery about it, but it's like when you read that in 2024, 1 in 10 devs lost their job, and then they're talking about like, well, we need more profits. It's like, well, what the? Okay, you know,
again, devil's advocate, Rockstar's been relatively immune to that.
That's fair enough. For
It's
them,
every
I
other
guess.
studio.
Yeah.
You know, not Larian though.
Yeah,
Also,
you know.
they're also keeping theirs. So,
But it just like, I don't know, in the industry that is so huge, bigger than movies, bigger than TV, right? In this huge ass industry, they're talking that they're not making enough on their products, but it's like, well, man, you were raking me 7 ways from Sunday just trying to get a fucking couple hours of catharsis from my fucking work week and shitty American life. Like this. Like, I mean, my American life is fine. I have it better than like 90% of the people on the planet.
You did say shitty American.
I did specify.
Yeah.
But it's like, dude, it's stressful as fuck. Like reading the news and going to work and not having health care. And like, I just want a couple hours of catharsis. And they're going to fucking rake me over that too? I mean, come on, man. Like, give me a break. Give me a break. I need one.
it does suck.
Yeah. All right. Well, you know.
Well, speaking of, I won't say speaking of suck because I'm actually genuinely excited about this. I think probably everybody knows because this happened late last week. But Nintendo announced the Nintendo Switch 2.
God, what a missed opportunity.
I know we've talked about this on the podcast. We just had this conversation a few minutes ago. It should have been the Super Switch.
Yeah. Come on.
Right there.
It's right there.
So there's a couple interesting things that I noticed. One is that the hardware doesn't change too much. It does have, I think it's a sleeker form factor. I think they took a lot of the design notes that they learned better from the Switch and implemented them here. Like, for instance, there's no rounded bezel around the USB-C, which was just shown on screen. It should fit more flush because there was much more potential to break off your USB-C or bend it in some capacity the way it was designed previously. And I am just getting these notes essentially from the trailer because that's all we know, like concrete about the Switch 2. I also do like the fact that if you are to put on your Joy-Cons the wrong way, they're not broken forever because it is using what looks like magnets to attach to the console. Now, there's a little bit, I have worries there too, that they may not stick into the console very well when you're using it handheld, but we have yet to see. The main interesting thing that I'd like to note about the design choice is what they just showed. I'm actually going to play that again here on the video podcast. Is in the trailer, they're showing these Joy-Cons skating along the ground. And a lot of people are theorizing, based on the design language that's happening on the connected part of the controllers, is that these might actually work as mice.
Oh.
Which I think
clever.
which I think would be really interesting, especially because like they did change the form factor of the shoulder buttons, and they look like they might be usable as mice, which I think is pretty interesting.
That is pretty interesting.
Yeah, if they're starting to take on some of the notes that other consoles have, is they're trying to make it a little bit more like a PC, trying to give it some additional functionality because like the Switch isn't. It's got a browser. It's a really simple one, but it's effective. It has its store and it's got a few apps outside of just playing games on it. But for the most part, it is really gaming centric, really gaming focused. You can watch YouTube on it. There is a Netflix app, but none of it feels like it's really developed for the Switch. It feels like an afterthought, between hardware and software. Whereas this seems to lean a little bit in more of a where we're going with all of our, consoles and appliances is meant to be online, meant to be, used as more than just a Game Boy, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's cool. Also, it based on some leaks, it does seem like this is going to be some pretty solid hardware. Now, we're not talking PS5, we're not talking Xbox Series, we're not talking those levels of hardware, obviously, because it's a mobile chip, right? But as we've seen with the other mobile platforms, the other mobile PCs, i.e. Steam Deck, etc., is these things are getting relatively powerful, especially for their size. We do know that it's going to be coming with an NVIDIA custom Tegra T239 processor, and based on what we know about that processor is it will likely be about as powerful as the PS4, maybe PS4 Pro, and Xbox One, maybe Xbox One. What do they call the Plus, the Scorpio, the
It's Xbox.
yeah, the One X. It's come on, Microsoft. So somewhere in between those. So last gen, but like upper end of last gen potentially. It is theorized, and while it's rumored, these rumors are relatively substantiated. They do come from leakers that have been constantly leaking Nintendo stuff for years now. So specifically, there is one guy, Nate. I'm never gonna find that. There is specifically one guy that's been like
Nate.
Yeah, Nate on Twitter. He'll be in the show notes. But on X, he has been spouting stuff about the Switch 2 for like the last couple months now, and basically what we've seen from the trailer is it's basically all correct. We do know that it's not going to be OLED. They're going back to LCD. He said that a while back, and that turns out to be true. So unfortunately, those that like the Switch OLED, this is going back to LCD. It's probably not going to look as good as your Switch does right now, at least crispness of the image. But it does look like it's going to be relatively powerful hardware considering the form factor. That said, it does look like there are going to be a number of AAA developers that have been staying off of the Switch due to its lack of power for quite some time. And that's because we do know from rumors, so I guess we don't know, but it is rumored that it's still going to be 720p, but it's going to be upscaled into like 1080p, 1440p plus, which is what everybody's doing. Xbox and PlayStation are already doing that. DLSS, which people are talking about a lot right now because the new NVIDIA cards, DLSS and frame generation, it's happening on all platforms, PC, consoles alike. So it's to be expected that the Switch 2 is probably going to be pulling a little bit of that, upscaling trickery as well. Meaning that they can get away with a little bit lower tier hardware and start getting some of the games that came out at the end of the life cycle of the PS4 and Xbox One, and then maybe even the lower tier part of the PS5 and Xbox Series. Because there are lots of rumors. Like it is rumored right now that Final Fantasy VII Remake will be coming to the Switch 2 maybe by launch, and that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will be also. There's also plenty of other games that look like they're going to be coming out. It's possible that GTA 6 might be coming on the Switch 2 way after its initial launch. So we might be seeing lots of ports of lots of modern titles on the Switch. What I mean to say is that like the AAA creators are talking very seriously about getting modern games on the Switch, where it's been largely ignored by most of the AAA developers, which I think is interesting. I mean, the Switch had no problem selling. It was the #1 console for years in this last cycle. And I have no doubt Switch 2 is probably going to perform similarly as long as it's priced similarly to the launch of the original Switch. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be solid hardware. It's getting a larger screen. The whole thing is larger, including the Joy-Cons, which is nice because I'm a guy that's got big paws, and those little Joy-Cons, especially if you're going to do multiplayer, are just not it.
Yeah.
So a little bit more comfortable of an experience. A larger screen, unfortunately LCD, not OLED. A better CPU and GPU combo. Also, storage has changed. It's going to have actually like legit on-store storage, at least 256 gigabytes, according to rumors. And it's also going to be allowing micro SD express cards, which can carry capacity up to 128 terabytes. Though 128 terabytes is like a couple $1,000. So it's much more reasonable to think that you're going to be getting 2 terabytes.
Yeah, 2 terabytes.
Yeah, but that stores a lot of games.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what you're getting. A terabyte is what you're getting on the highest end of all of the other handhelds. So as long as they can make relatively fast, large amounts of storage on these cards, then I don't see any reason why these games couldn't be stored on those cards, because they already are, essentially.
Oh, so, right. That's kind of what they come in now. It's, little card. So.
Yeah. On top of that, one of the biggest complaints that I had about the original design of the original Switch was the kickstand. That little kickstand, it's broken on almost every Switch out there. Like, that kickstand gets 10 hours of use before that thing fucking breaks. You get one accidental press down too hard on the kickstand before that thing just pops the fuck off. So it is getting like a whole body kickstand, which we did see in the trailer.
They just need to make it metal.
I mean, I wouldn't mind. They do have like rigid metal parts within the plastic chassis. But as far as the stand specifically, it's really hard to tell whether it's metal or plastic, but at any rate, it is like nearly the size of the entire console. And it flips down and seems like it's going to be able to take more of a load, going to be less of a weak point. If all of that's true, that like modern titles are going to be aimed at the Switch 2 and the AAA developers are taking this seriously, and we're going to start seeing games coming out simultaneously or around the same time as they do on PS5, Xbox Series, PC, coming to the Switch, I think that makes it even that much more obvious of a buy, especially if they're able to get 4K resolution scaling. Like, then you can sit it in your dock. 4K TVs are becoming ubiquitous. You can't buy something that is less than 4K TV anymore. So if they can nail that, then I think they've got a really super solid console on their hands, man.
Yeah, I liked I like everything that they're doing with the improvements. It looks like they really followed some of the notes on the drawbacks of the first Switch. But I still felt like that as a introduction or as the first trailer I felt a little underwhelmed.
Sure. I mean, it was a shitty trailer, and we don't know much else about it, but there will be a Nintendo Direct follow-up in February. And
very
then
good.
Like a long form discussion about the Switch come, I think it was April.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen maybe another couple of titles that were coming with launch. Like, it would have been cool to see like Metroid or a Smash Bros. Instead of like a little baby peek at what looked like Mario Kart.
Yeah, it's a new Mario Kart. This it has been confirmed that this is not Mario Kart 8, so at least a new Mario Kart.
So it would have been nice to see a peek at a couple other titles, but I'll withhold judgment fully until that Nintendo Direct, because I'm excited about the design changes. Mm-hmm. It looks cool. Yeah, it'd be cool to have a Nintendo in the house again. It's been a while.
Yeah, man. To be honest, like my biggest complaint with the Switch is that it was a slow experience. Like I mean, I don't play handheld games, so I played it almost exclusively docked. I found the Joy-Cons and the whole console to be just uncomfortable to use because I have large hands. Being that this is going to be a little bit larger, it might be more comfortable, and I might be using it a little bit more mobile if I buy one. But at least in the dock, if it can be like a relatively powerful console and feel just more responsive than the original Switch, because there was like visible latency. That thing would just chug sometimes, meaning the UI was really slow. You were waiting like every time you launch the store, it's got an update that's going to take you at least 20 minutes, and then it's going to take like 5 minutes for that thing to load. It was like a frustrating experience. Switching between applications also really frustrating experience. The load times were just unacceptable. So if this can be that much more powerful and deliver just a smoother experience for me, that'll be better. And if this thing can have like a really big software focus and having a really good UI and UX, that'll make it that much more likely that I'm to buy one. Especially if there's games that I like on it. I did buy a Switch specifically for Nintendo games, but I hate that. Like, I really do wish that it could be a more all-around enjoyable experience where I got to play more than just the Nintendo games that I wanted to play. Literally bought the thing so I could play Breath of the Wild. I'd like there to be a fucking Metal Gear game on there so I can play it, right? Or just something else.
I think that would be an interesting meta topic to maybe talk about one time is Nintendo's walled garden. Is it still a benefit now? Like, because they do really well doing what they do.
Totally, yeah.
But if they open, like, because I kind of wanted to talk about it when you were talking about the AAA titles thing. If they open themselves up to that, they open themselves up to judgment based on what the others are doing as well. Whereas now it's like, well, Nintendo does what Nintendo does and they kick ass at it.
Yeah.
But if you're, trying to play fucking God of War on your Switch too and it sucks, well, you're going to compare it to playing God of War 2 on your PS5. And it's going to be like, nah, this thing's a fucking chug bunny. I don't like it. So, I mean, it does, I feel like...
You're not wrong.
Yeah, I feel like that's a nuanced topic, actually, to kind of get into. But I was honestly thinking that when you're talking about it, it's like that... As much of a benefit, that could be a double-edged sword, could be not a benefit in the long run. But
I think it'll still be beneficial because there are some people that are just going to buy the Switch because they buy every Nintendo console. So for them, getting to experience games and they may not otherwise.
More games to more players is always a good thing. But
I do have a list. The guy's name is Nate the Hate, by the way. Thanks for taking a minute, Josh, so I could look that up. It does look like on launch, the rumored games are going to be Mario Kart 9, a new 3D Mario game, potentially Mario Odyssey 2, Metroid Prime 4, an enhanced Zelda game like Breath of the Wild remake or remaster, Final Fantasy VII Remake with Rebirth coming in 2026, Assassin's Creed Mirage, The Division, Rainbow Six Siege, Mario Rabbids Collection, Metal Gear Solid Delta, Alan Wake 2, Cyberpunk 2077, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Monster Hunter Wilds, Elden Ring, a complete edition that includes the DLC, Grand Theft Auto 6, or potentially Grand Theft Auto 5, the Master Chief Collection that came out of nowhere, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, MLB The Show, and Titanfall 2 and EA Sports games. A lot of those are pretty good games.
Yeah.
And if they play well on the Switch too, then...
Why the hell not?
Yeah. Especially if it comes out at the same price as the Switch did. $300 is pretty easy to chew on in comparison to other modern consoles.
I would be surprised if it came out at the same price point.
I don't know. This is essentially equivalent hardware. It's just 2025.
Yeah.
They're even going back to LCD rather than OLED. You're right.
I'm a cynicist, and I think that's purely so that they can do an OLED edition of the Switch 2.
Could be. could be.
Wouldn't be surprised.
And I wouldn't be surprised if it came out at more, $350 or $400. I wouldn't be surprised, but I do think there is potential for it to be $300.
I bet minimum it's going to be $100 more.
But if you look at their track record, they sell consoles for $300. Every console since the Nintendo 64 has been $300, or since the GameCube has been $300 from Nintendo. Wii U, and Switch all launched at $300. And came out with cheaper variants later.
Maybe we'll see.
The Switch OLED came out at $300.
That's fair. All right, that's fair. That is fair. It did come out at $300.
So I mean, if they follow that trend, now it's been years since the Switch came out. So like, definitely could do $400. I don't doubt it. But I do think there's a chance for it to be.
Honestly, $400 wouldn't be egregious.
It's still $200 less than the others.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's going to be higher, but it's not going to be at the same rate as the new consoles coming out.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I'm relatively excited to at least see what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I wouldn't mind Nintendo being in my household again in a way that I care about. Because, I really enjoyed the time that I spent with the Switch, but I never picked that thing up, man. I just don't. I'm just not interested in playing another Rabbids game or, Splatoon. So
I'm hoping the shit out of some Smash Bros, though, brother.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially if the controllers are more comfortable. Well, hey, I think unless you guys have anything else, that just about wraps it up this week.
Yeah.
All right. Well, real quick, I'd like to give a shout out. We gained quite a substantial amount of followers and subscribers on YouTube and Twitch. I'd like to just shout out a couple. There's a few public profiles. Duderoos, Dr. Jason Haram Lester, and Norbit Peb 1074. Thank you for subscribing to our YouTube. And then thank you, Kala Guaguas and Lyra Zane for following on Twitch. Really appreciate y'all. Seeing the community grow a little bit is always fun.
Very nice.
Join us in chat, please. Check out videogametango.com and leave us a voicemail if you'd like to be featured on the show. It's always a fun time. So, anyways, guys, thank you so much for being here again this week. Appreciate y'all. And we'll see you on the next one.